My talk, A Diversity of Perennial and Edimental Vegetables, Nutritious, Tasty, Climate, Nature-Friendly, and No-Dig. What's not to like about them? Anyway, I noticed in the program that I was billed as the crazy salad man. Now, previously I was just the extreme salad man, but now I'm the crazy salad man. So that's why I have these 3 initials after my name. Being a Brit, I need a few initials to show how important I am. Anyway, so, and this is my oldest perennial vegetable that I learned in a book by John Seymour that came out in 1979, which I bought in 1980, I think, thereabouts. This is sea kale, one of the few perennial vegetables or unusual perennial vegetables in that book, along with asparagus and artichoke. And I've been growing, I got some root cuttings around about, I moved to Norway in 1981 as a young vegetarian, and very soon after that, I bought some root cuttings of sea kale, and that plant, 40 years on, is still alive in my garden. The only thing I do with it, I do like to make it feel at home, so I give it a mulch of seaweed every autumn. But apart from that, I don't do anything. And it delivers and delivers and delivers over the years. And what a beautiful plant it is in full flower on the shoreline, also in a garden. In the 19th century, it was almost totally over-harvested in the UK because it was such a popular vegetable, and it was also grown in home gardens, particularly when it became known that it was becoming extinct in nature. It's also known as the king of the vegetables because it was served to royalty. Rich people would force it for Christmas dinner very early. Of course, it's a spring vegetable in nature. And even Thomas Jefferson, the US president, that was his favorite vegetable that he imported from the UK. But enough said about that. Let's get on. Why am I called the crazy salad man? It's because of these, can I, over there maybe? Is it on? I don't see any lights here. Bear with me. Talk amongst yourselves in small groups. There we go. Shall I take a... Oh, yeah, okay. Anyway, so these crazy salads I started making, inspired by the Mediterranean diet. Everybody's heard about the Mediterranean diet, and we're still, well, in Norway at least, we're encouraged to eat the Mediterranean diet. But in the late 1990s, I started looking at the real ethnobotanical literature about what actually these old folks in the mountain villages in Greece and Italy, etc., are eating to make themselves so fit. Very, very little cardiovascular disease in these areas. And when I was reading the literature, and in fact over that period, the last 30, 40 years, they have registered over 3,000 species of edible plants just in the Mediterranean region. And not only that, they also discovered that there were all these multi-species dishes which would typically be made in the springtime when there was the bounty available, and often over 50, 60 different ingredients. So people would go out into nature, into the where the olive trees grow, and in nature, and they would harvest everything they knew were edible. And it was kind of like a learning experience for the younger people, the way of transferring the knowledge about edible plants so that in the years they really needed those plants, that knowledge was intact in these mountain villages. And I found that really fascinating. And at the same time, I inherited something called collectomania. And I had this big collection of over 2,000 edible plants in my subarctic garden in Norway. And I thought, well, I can do that. We had an open day in a national organic garden network open day, and I decided that we would break the world record in diversity salads. So we made a salad with 537 that year. Crazy, yeah. So you understand. All these have only about 100 to 200 different ingredients. No. Can you? Oh yeah, here we go. And I have my own diet. 80 a day keeps the doctor away. Yeah, this was 115 edible flowers I had in one salad one year. Something we call a fantasy salad after Aya Noack here, she's written a book, Fantasy Salate, in Danish. We made a pesto with 230 different alliums, or onions. We made a ferment with 412 different plants, and this was about 2016, and that ferment is still edible today. A friend of mine who helped me to make that ferment in her fridge, it's still edible, she told me just a month ago. Amazing. I made a winter salad with 140 different plants. In the middle of early March, I was invited by the Norwegian Credo gourmet restaurant, Michelin star restaurant in Trondheim, to join them to make a special dinner in connection with the Kosmorama Film Festival, Trondheim's film festival, which that year concentrated on films about food, including the Noma film and one of Michael Pollan's films. And this salad was made without a greenhouse, without any freezing, only drying, and I didn't use any additional electricity to make this salad. So it was just an old house in my area with a decent cold cellar. Yeah. And then, next one. Oh yeah. Oh dear. Shall I just say yes and next one, and you can. Last one. Oh yeah, no, it is the next one. Yeah, I'm there now. That was funny. Yeah, and this was you can get the recipe for this one. This was a traditional calzone from Sicily, which took me 6 years to make because I had to first grow the 60 different ingredients in this salad, in this calzone. Next one. I made that world record salad in 2003. On the 20th anniversary, we made this pizza with 229 plants, and it was served to a group of psychologists. Crazy salad man. Invite psychologists to his garden to analyze this pizza here. They all laughed. They didn't know I was going to do this, and turned up, and I presented this. Please analyze this pizza. Anyway, it was a sourdough, barley, rye pizza, which was whole grain as well. Okay, this is my house, the edible, which has become known as the Edible Garden. It's part of it's a permaculture land centre, and it's part of Kvan, is the Norwegian Seed Saver organisation, which I led for several years. Yeah, next one. Since I took early retirement in 2000, next one, I can do it now. I was. Not now, no. Okay, so this is where I'm located, Trondheim, 63.4 degrees north. It maybe seems extreme in many ways, but it's actually a very mild climate. We actually, this year, it seems we're going to have 6 months of non-freezing weather, believe it or not. You said 3, couldn't believe it. So the forecast for the rest of October is for no frost, and we didn't have any frost in April, so this year, 6 months. When I took early retirement, I worked as an oceanographer, an ocean wave climatologist, up until 2017. I took early retirement to concentrate on plants. And I took over, I said yes to join this community garden, which is in Trondheim, about 10 kilometers from my house. And here, over the last 7 years, I've created what I call the World Garden. It's basically a 12-meter diameter circle. The center point represents the North Pole and the Arctic regions of the world, where you'll find various edibles from the mountains of the world. And then I've planted geographically around the North Pole. So at the bottom you have Europe, and then you have Japan, Korea on the top. It's basically my book transferred to a formal garden. It has about 160 plants. Actually, my book has many more than 80, which you would think in the title. And that's been a lot of fun in creating, together with this area here, which I call a vegetable sanctuary, which is a place where I maintain local varieties of vegetables, traditional annual crops, biennials, etc. And I also do a little bit of my own landrace gardening. So I'm working with fava beans, broad beans, particularly earlier varieties to benefit people even further north than where I live, in addition to my own Grex of many different colors. So I think that was inspired by Søren Holt, who maybe you were inspired by Joseph in return, I'm not sure. I'm working with chicories, I'm working with runner beans as well to get an early enough variety to save my own seed. And yeah, just a huge diversity. In addition, we've planted a collection of something like close to 300 different fruit, berry, and nut trees. My area is the best place in the world to grow vegetables. Sorry. A diversity of, we have a perfect climate for most things. It's maybe challenging to grow tomatoes and squash and these kind of things outside, but there are thousands of other things, tens of thousands of other things you can grow. Should try. I also said yes to be a guest researcher at the Ringve Botanical Gardens in Trondheim, where I've created what I call the Onion Garden Chicago. Chicago actually means stinking place in the woods, because Chicago was built on the in an area where there were huge numbers of onions. So that's the name that stuck. And throughout the season, Allium genus is my favorite edible genus, and it just shows the enormous diversity that one particular genus can represent, with flowering alliums. And these are all perennials, long-lived perennials, which are plants which some of them are in flower in May, and some actually only just manage to flower in October before the first frost arrives. And it looks beautiful all year. I've been very pleased with the way that this has developed. It was based on a collection of old Norwegian alliums, which I collected all over the country for the Norwegian Genetic Resource Center. So everything from chives to Victory-onion, Seerslurk, Allemannsharnisk, I think it's called and yeah, there are 6 or 7 botanical species of allium which were traditionally grown in home gardens in Norway. In addition to that, we've planted over 100 species of allium, of the around 900 species which are found in the world. So quite a large percentage of them. And altogether, there are over 400 different alliums in this garden. So please come and visit. It's open 24 hours. You just have to get yourselves to Trondheim. I found out that it was actually 20 years ago I first had contact with frøsamlerne, Danish seed savers, and it was Lila Taul and Brian Kraus who contacted me in an email because they'd heard about this wonderful perennial vegetable, Hablitzia tamnoides, the Caucasian spinach, stjernemelde, rankspinat, which, if I'm challenged to name one plant that is my favorite perennial vegetable, it would probably be this one, because it really is a productive, nutritious, tasty, perennial vegetable. And my oldest plant is now, I planted in 2001, so it's 23 years old. It's never had any fertilizer. Joseph will be pleased with that. And rarely gets any water. That's the magic of perennials. They're much more robust against changes in the climate because they're growing most actively in the springtime when there's still plenty of water, and they've got a big root system which brings up all the nutrients. I know, Aya, you have some plants for sale, and Miris, Tycho, I saw had some seeds available as well. Just rush through these. And of course, it all ended up in my book, which we've already mentioned. I have a few with me. And the book effectively champions the world's leafy green perennial vegetables. I feel that often leafy vegetables are neglected. Okay, there's a lot of talk about fruits and berries, etc., but very little about the huge diversity of leafy greens, which was an important component in the Mediterranean diet in particular. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to write this book, to actually just show what an amazing diversity of these plants, which were hardy and nutritious, were available. I also made up a word, edimentals, in 2008 to describe the combination of edible and ornamental, because there were so many of these perennial vegetables that were also beautiful to look at. And in fact, some of our best-known stauda, or perennials, ornamental perennials, are actually edible, like hosta and daylilies, etc. There's several others you can see here. So in summer, they all flower, which is a big advantage. It's also a big advantage if you're a seed saver, because to save seed, you have to go through the flower stage. So seed saving is second best. Yeah, which one? Around the World in 80? Which other one? No, that's just an illustration of a forest garden. Yeah, but essentially my own garden has developed into a forest garden without me actually knowing what forest gardening was. So it was permaculture that discovered me rather than vice versa. Because I planted, my own garden was a wooded hillside, and I maintained that because I was very interested in nature and wanted birds and other organisms around me. And today, once COVID came along, I got time to actually investigate what an incredible biodiversity there was also on my place. So I've registered now 340 species of moth on my plot, and over 50, 60 species of wild bees and hoverflies. So I know that my forest garden is supporting an incredible biodiversity at the same time that I'm producing all my own food on that same piece of land. Very much what I think Joseph was talking about as well. Here we go again. Anyway, I thought I only had half an hour, and I'm going to go way over time, so you're going to stop me, and I'm going to run through all the rest of the slides. But I thought I'd do something a little bit different. It's now October, and these are all flowers which are currently flowering in the World Garden that I showed pictures of, and they are all in the Asteraceae, or the Curvblomst familia in or the daisy family, the sunflower family. You know that. And some of them are well-known tuber crops like Jerusalem artichoke in flower at the moment, the dahlias, which I know you, Joseph, have also experimented with breeding of tubers, which are tasty. And but the other ones, I think, are more or less all leafy greens, like aster, or the next picture actually shows what they're called. I can only remember that. Oh, no. Crazy. So, aster scaber. I know, you have one of the edible asters for sale. These are spring shoots, which are edible. And I think, and one of the reasons for choosing this is because I think this genus is underused. They're tasty if you prepare them in the right way. Very, very popular in the Far East, in Japan and Korea, etc. And they're beautiful, and they support the pollinating insects in the autumn. And just a few of these, I'll just go quickly through these. Aster scaber, the Korean aster, is a super important edible plant in Korea, grown in big greenhouses. My most beautiful autumn flowering plant. We have Aster yumena, which is also this is Aster scaber, the Korean aster, and behind it is this Japanese, which is even taller, which is about 2 meters tall at the moment in full flower. We have Ligularia fisheri, which is the king of the sanamul, or the king of the foraged vegetables in Korea, is this plant, which is also a superstar. Very sorry. Next one, I think, yeah. Next one. Yeah, and as you can see, again, grown in big greenhouses to satisfy the markets in the big cities where people have moved from the mountain villages and remember the really good taste from nature. And this is one of them. They also, they also use them. Use it just as a vegetable, but also as wraps. And in Korea, they always eat the wrap in addition to the fill. And then we have one that I hadn't discovered when my book came out. This is a plant I called Cherokee greens, sochan, which was the most important vegetable for the Cherokee people. You can find a lot more detail about this one on my blog, edimentals.com. In Norway, it is the best-known ornamental plant. So when I tell people this is a fantastic edible plant, they're really surprised. I like surprising people, if you haven't guessed. But in Norway, literally translate, it's called Kiss Me Over the Garden Gate. Kyss me over Hageporten. Young shoots in the springtime is the main crop, but you can harvest them almost up to flowering, the tops anyway. Delicious aromatic vegetable, which has been adopted by the Koreans. So now in the Korean mountain areas, they're actually growing this Cherokee greens as a commercial vegetable. Because again, it has this typical aster, how we describe it, kind of aromatic, flowery taste, which they so much love. Chrysanthemum tea is a big thing in the Far East. It's a similar taste to that. I've also made up a couple of other words, entomentals, which are plants which both are edible, ornamental, and insect-friendly. Ento for our entomology, and avimentals for bird-friendly edimentals. And there are all these fantastic, it's interesting to document the different edimentals that I have in my garden, also for the insects. Here are a few. And there are also plants which I call quadruple plant vegetables, or ento avimentals. And the thistles is one example of that. The tuberous thistles, like Cirsium tuberosum, the tuberous thistle, and Queen Anne's thistle, Cirsium carnum, both have edible tubers, which are delicious. And they also produce, they're beautiful to look at, and they also produce seeds, which are oil-rich and loved by the birds in the winter. Okay. Japan, Korea, and China, just a few plants from that part of the world. Hosta we've talked about. Japan is one of the biodiversity hotspots with over 2,000 edible endemic plants, many of which we already grow in our gardens in the West. There are rich foraging traditions, and it's important to realize that actually about 1/3 of the world's plants have been used for food at some stage or another. So that means there are over 100,000 edible plants in the world, huge diversity. And so that means probably 600 of the Japanese plants have been used. I have some very good, I have my own Bible from Japan, which contains information of several hundred foraged vegetables in Japan. Hugely important traditions. I was probably the first to write about hosta in the West. Seem to have been missed by all the books about oriental vegetables that started coming out in the 1970s. So I wrote in Permaculture magazine in 2008. Yeah, just a few pictures, just quickly go through these. This is King Charles's forest garden, where he has the biggest collection of large-leaved hostas in the UK. So that food, there's food in that forest. It's really quite impressive. I was invited there by the prince a few years ago, or at least by his private secretary, to see this garden. Japan, I was lucky to be invited along by Aya and some friends to a study tour to Japan. I can't remember, 2017 was it? Something like that. And we had interpreters, so we were able to see some of these previously foraged vegetables, sansai, mountain vegetables, in the supermarkets, like hosta in this case. We didn't actually visit a Japanese hosta farm, but this is what they look like. They basically dig up the whole plants and heap them in the autumn, and then they're moved into glass houses and forced throughout the winter for the markets. Delicious and and nutritious, it turns out, more nutritious than spinach or anything like that. Oh dear. Yeah, okay. This is my largest vegetable, which always surprises people that something like that could grow in the Arctic. But this is udo, Aurelia cordata, another very important vegetable in the Far East. It's the young. I tend to use the blanched shoots in the springtime, up to about a meter tall. And again, on this study tour to Japan, there's Aya. We visited these underground udo forcing caverns in the middle of Tokyo, which was absolutely fascinating. We were the first Europeans to ask to see this fascinating cultivation method. Me and the farmer. But they also cultivate in mountain villages, just heaping rice husks over the plants to mulch them. A few onions. The actual Chicago onion, or one of the species growing where Chicago is probably my favorite perennial onion. Hardy, beautiful. The pollinators love it, and it's also tasty. And there are hundreds of varieties to choose from because it's also grown as an ornamental. So you can tap into the ornamental gardeners as well as a vegetable grower. Viking onion, Victory onion, Allium victorialis, from the Lofoten Islands in Norway, where it is domesticated in a big way. Probably one of the most widespread geographical allium species in the world, from the Pyrenees to Japan. That was a Russian dish made by Søren Holt at the back some years ago when I visited him here in Denmark. Yeah, just pass over this. Victory Onion Safari to Lofoten. This is what it looks in people's gardens. People didn't know that it was a food, delicious, or anything like that. It was just grown as an ornamental up until about the 1990s. Vietz's onion is the most productive allium we have in the onion garden. It's a hybrid between Allium scemense and fistulosum, the peeplerk or Welsh onion. Just amazingly productive, and you can eat all of that. You could make an onion soup with it. You don't need to use a bulb onion to make onion soup. And hugely popular with the pollinating insects. One of the parent species is called tower onion, Allium scemense, which is also a very impressive onion. And here we have an onion soup under development. From the Netherlands, and actually also discovered in Croatia and India, is St. John's onion, or St. Hanslerk, St. Johansuin, which was a kind of perennial shallot, which was harvested around midsummer and then replanted and harvested again a year after. Totally hardy in my area, despite the fact that this particular cultivar was collected in Croatia on a small Adriatic island. And the hardiness comes from that same species, Allium scemense, the tower onion, which is one of two or perhaps three parent species. And because it's earlier than shallot, it complements it in many ways, in my mind. In the Netherlands, it's been outcompeted by shallots being grown in glass houses today, which I think is a great shame. Onion bhaji. I've come from UK, so Indian food is the big thing. So we made onion bhaji with those 1 year. Allium molly, allium, the Syrian onion, and grows in the mountains of Syria and Lebanon, of all places. Beautiful, hardy onion with these white flowers in the springtime, which I use quite a lot at that time. Getting there again. Persian shallot, dried onions from, well, we buy them as ornamental onions in garden centres in the autumn for the flowers, but practically all of those species we buy are also fantastic food onions, particularly Allium stipitatum, which is an ingredient in Iran's most popular dish, mastomycia, which is yogurt with onions, rehydrated onions. So they're dried, they're cut into slices, dried, and sent to Iranian supermarkets around the world. Great ornamental. Garlic, we'll hop over that. I'll just point out that I grow garlic on a 2-year cycle, not one. I believe you can get bigger yields from just harvesting every 2nd year. This is a perennial plant, so you can just let it go. I'm a lazy gardener too, so I only harvest it every 2nd year. And yeah, this is what it looks like. So each individual clove will then resprout and produce 4 or 5. And so you start with 4 or 5 what do you call them? Fed cloves. Each one of those then will become, the following year, will perhaps have 3 or 4 cloves. So you can see it's you're getting a lot of cloves. Each one is slightly smaller, but I was very surprised how big they were, nevertheless. And I'm sure the fungi are really coming into play in this 2-year cycle. Allium vilicii, Sherpa onion. This is the high elevation Nepal onion growing in Nepal, over 4,000 meters height. Beautiful ornamental. And this was a Nepalese botanist who visited my garden. He'd never seen this species. They'd eaten it more or less every day, dried in lentil soup. And he had to come all the way to Trondheim to experience this particular one. 2 more, Allium nutans, the Siberian nodding onion, and Allium senescens, which is also Siberian very productive Siberian onion, and Norrlands onion, which is a hybrid Nutans angulosum, which was discovered in old gardens in northern Sweden some years ago. Very productive, great edible plant. So thank you very much. That's for me.